All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are getting close to the end of week 2 of our second annual SBIR STTR Con 2020. I'm Misty Madero. I'm the Industry Contracts Officer and SBIR STTR Resource Center Manager at UC Riverside in the Office of Technology Partnerships. I'd like to again welcome everyone for joining us today and also thank our sponsors. We'd like to thank the SBA and our Orange County Inland Empire SBDC network. Our conference is organized by UCR's EPIC Small Business Development Center and our Resource Center. Our EPIC SBDC provides individualized mentorship and access to capital to technology entrepreneurs at no cost. And our Resource Center offers the following services free of charge. If you are interested in learning how we can help you with your small business or help you on submitting winning proposals for SBIRs, please reach out to me or my co-host, Martin Kleckner. I'm going to now turn it over to Martin. He's an entrepreneur in residence and our SBIR STTR guru. Take it away, Martin.
Thanks, Misty, very much, and welcome indeed to everybody. It's week 2 on Thursday. I think, Misty, I think we've lost count, but I think it is Thursday, and we're getting close to the end of a very successful 2 weeks. Really proud to say that. Really honored to introduce to you our initial talk today with the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, focus on seeking and development of fundamental knowledge about the brain and nervous system to reduce the burden of neurological diseases. So the NINDS supports and performs basic translational and clinical neuroscience research through grants, contracts, scientific meetings, and research also in its own laboratories and clinics. Really proud to introduce you to Dr. Emily Caporello. She is the director of the Division of Translational Research at the NINDS Small Business Program. Prior to that, she was VP of Research at MindX Corporation, where she had a concentration on brain-computer interface systems, and preceding that, Science and Engineering Tech Advisor at DARPA. Now, she has a couple of other backgrounds which I find especially intriguing, and maybe, Emily, we can talk in discussing or presenting those one day. Emily has co-founded a company called CleverPet. It was based upon her postdoc work at UCSD, focused on automated training of complex behavior in animals. I've got a similar one called Clever Owner of Dogs, where my 2 pugs have actually trained me in complex behavior. So maybe we can blend those 2 ventures together.
Absolutely.
Equally interesting is that, Emily, you received your PhD at UCSD, where you performed research in cortical auditory processing and attention in songbirds. Absolutely fascinating. Maybe we can talk into coming back and giving a talk just on that topic. I would love to hear it. So anyway, let me hand the baton over to you, and welcome indeed, Emily. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and pop my slides up. Okay, and hopefully those are showing up for everybody. Thank you. And just
good to go.
Okay, great. And just a quick correction, I'm the director of the Small Business Program at NINDS, which sits in the Division of Translational Research. And I'm very happy to talk to everyone today about small business funding opportunities at NINDS. I am going to skip over a lot of the basics of SBIR and STTR. I'm sure everyone has heard that in this past week. But assuming that you are a company that is eligible for small business funding, there's a few things you'd want to go through to see if NINDS is the right place to seek support. So here we go. So the first question is, does your project fall under the NINDS mission? Neuroscience in general is supported by several institutes across NIH. NINDS focuses specifically on neurological disorders in the neurology space. This includes stroke and epilepsy, many neurodegenerative disorders, spinal cord injury, TBI, neurogenetic disorders, and many other additional disorders that you can look through on our website. if you're working within this neurological indication space, it's likely that your project is going to fall into our program's portfolio. We support a broad range of modalities, everything from small molecules, devices, biologics, diagnostics, research tools. We also support a broad range of R&D activities, everything from that very early step out of the academic lab and that early drug discovery or device prototyping, all the way through early stage clinical trials. And the next question would be, does your project fit within the budget and timeline guidance for our institute? Now, these guidelines do change across the different institutes, which is why it's really important to identify the appropriate institute for your project before you apply. At NINDS, we allow phase 1 durations that go anywhere from 6 to 24 months, and phase 2 durations that go anywhere from 2 to 3 years. We also allow budgets that exceed the hard cap if those projects fit within pre-approved waiver topics that are listed here and also are available to look at on our website. These topics are, as you'll see, generally pretty broad. They cover a lot of the projects that come in to our portfolio. And we recognize that these activities often require a higher level of support to execute in a rigorous manner. In a phase 1, if your project falls into a waiver topic, you can exceed the small business hard cap of $256K and go up to $700K in total cost with no more than $500K per year. And in phase 2, you can exceed the hard cap of 1.7 million and go up to 3 million in total cost with no more than 1.5 million per year. So you do have quite a bit of budget flexibility in your SBIR and STTR application. Finally, you want to take a look at which funding opportunity that NINDS participates in would be best for your project. I know this slide is complicated, but I will let you know the majority of new projects that come into NINDS come in through the Omnibus funding opportunity announcement. This Omnibus is meant to get all investigator-initiated research that is relevant to HHS. So it covers not only NIH, but other HHS organizations like the FDA, and almost everything will be applicable that you're doing to the Omnibus. The question is whether there might be a specific focused opportunity that would be appropriate that NINDS participates in. For the Omnibus, NINDS accepts non-clinical trial phase 1, phase 2, direct to phase 2, and fast track applications. Again, I'm not going to go through the specifics of these mechanisms in this talk because it's general to SBIR and STTR, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that. There are certain specific funding opportunities that have a certain technical focus or fit into a specific initiative. At NINDS, these include funding opportunity for research tools funded by the BRAIN Initiative, funding opportunities specific to pain management, which is funded by the HEAL Initiative, and specific funding opportunities related to Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease-related dementia. We also support later stage activities through separate funding opportunity announcements as well. This includes a separate funding opportunity for clinical trials that's at NINDS. So this is another reason it's very important to identify if your project fits into NINDS, if you are doing a clinical trial, because we do not participate in the Omnibus. So if you were to submit to the Omnibus, we would not be able to fund it. We have this specific funding opportunity for clinical trials that fall under NINDS. And one of the specific restrictions for the requirements for that funding opportunity announcement is that applications must have either an IND, an IDE, or a non-significant risk designation from the IRB at the time of application. And this differs from requirements that are in the Omnibus and at different institutes. So again, if you're looking to support a clinical trial in the neurological space, that's definitely a good time to come talk to us beforehand to make sure we're getting you the appropriate guidance. We also have additional opportunities for later stage activities, including phase 2B or bridge funding and the commercialization readiness pilot. We participate in both of these programs. These are funding opportunities that are only open to companies who have received phase 2 funding from the NIH. It doesn't necessarily have to be from NINDS, but I'm not going to go into those in depth just because it is open to a limited pool. I'm very happy to answer any questions if you have any on those as well. I also want to talk a little bit about the application support that we can provide to companies who are new to NIH SBIR STTR funding. The first is the Applicant Assistance Program, which I highly recommend. This is open to companies that have never received NIH SBIR STTR funding. It is fine if you have applied before and not been successful. It's also fine if you've received SBIR or STTR funding from other institute or other organizations like NSF or the DoD. It is intended to help small businesses who are applying for phase 1 funding only, so other mechanisms would not apply. And through this program, companies can receive support and guidance at no cost to develop their application. This includes support in actually preparing the application. It's basically 10 weeks of coaching on your application that's provided at no cost to you. We highly encourage diverse applicants to apply, and each participating institute at NIH, there are 8 institutes that participate right now, has a finite number of slots. So basically each institute can opt into this program and have a certain number of slots they can fill. NINDS has 12 slots per round, and the application the pool of applicants tends to range for eligible applicants anywhere from maybe 15 to 35 per round. So, you know, the competitiveness of this program varies, but sometimes it's not terribly competitive. So I definitely encourage if you fall into the eligibility for this program, highly encourage applying to it. The application portal will open in December for companies that want to prepare a phase 1 application for the April 5th submission deadline. In addition, our institute has begun hosting pre-application webinars. The next pre-application webinar will be on November 7th, and we will post the slides to our website afterward. And the goal in this is to have a time when we can kind of go over some of those FAQs that we get pre-application, take questions from applicants, and hopefully provide some guidance for getting ready for the application. In addition, I highly recommend taking a look at the online resources that are available to you. The general SBIR NIH.gov website has a lot of resources that include some recently renovated FAQs that are quite comprehensive, information on policies, eligibility information, sample applications, lists of funding opportunities, due dates, budget and timeline guidance. And you can also take a look at NINDS specific information at our website that is linked there as well. In addition, it can be helpful to take a look if other similar projects to yours have been funded and what institute funded them. And you can do this through the NIH Reporter tool, which is also linked here. And then finally, you can always contact staff directly. The best way to make use of this time is to send a draft specific aims page that shows us what the project is that you're working on. This will help us to identify or confirm what institute is best for your project and connect you to the right program officer. And then we can answer any specific questions. So we can confirm or recommend a specific funding opportunity, and we can help to answer any specific questions that maybe you can't find through those other means. We do try to email responses whenever possible for the sake of trying to get you that information as quickly as we can. But please note, if you do want to talk to program staff, it can be 4 or even sometimes more weeks to actually get on our calendar because of the volume of inquiries that we have, especially leading up to the due date. So definitely a good idea to be planning your application early and reach out early if you have questions for us so that we can get you the answers that you're looking for. Once you are funded by NIH, there's also a number of means of support that we provide to companies. So we do provide business strategy development for phase 1 companies through the I-Corps and C3I programs. The I-Corps program you may have heard about this week. It is hosted by both the NIH and NSF. NSF holds, I believe, holds it nationally in various different areas. And it's meant to help companies develop their business plan and have a lot of engagement with their customers or supply chain potential customers. And then we also have a C3I program, which is very similar, but very focused on medical devices and device technologies, assays, things like that. So if you are pursuing a phase 1, please take a look or keep in mind that those 2 opportunities are available to you. In addition, for all companies, there's access to supplements to promote diversity. So these supplements allow companies to bring on an underrepresented individual as a staff member and have them lead and mentor them in business development and in their career to do a project that is related to the project they were funded to do. There's also access to innovator support consults. These include entrepreneurs in residence, regulatory strategists. We also have IP consultants available that are happy to speak to any NIH funded company, small business. And then we also, through across NIH, will sponsor companies to attend various partnering meetings and allow them to pitch and present to potential investors. So we will provide companies with speaking slots at partnership meetings such as Bio, Resi, Life Sciences Summit, and some others. And we also will provide pitch coaching for those meetings with the entrepreneurs in residence that work with NIH. And then finally, we are launching a new program to help companies access technical and business assistance, or TABA. TABA is a program that is part of the Congressional Small Business Administration's SBIR and STTR program, which allows companies to access up to $6K in technical and business assistance for phase 1 and $50K for phase 2. And this program through NIH is going to help companies identify what resources they need and help get them those resources. So more information should be unveiling across NIH on that later this fall. And I do want to leave a lot of time for questions, but I wanted to see that quickly with some of the frequently asked questions that I get and I can address here. The first is, what percentage of SBIR and STTR applications are funded at NINDS? So this is actually public for NIH. It is available on that sbir.nih.gov website. And about 20% of phase 1 direct to phase 2 and fast tracks, these are all the kind of new projects getting funded, are successful in getting supported by the NIH. And then roughly 40% of those follow-on projects, so phase 2, and there's less data available, but phase 2B and other follow-on funding tends to be around 40%. The information is not published by institute, but NINDS tends to track very closely to these NIH-wide numbers. When will I find out if my application will be funded? That's typically about 6 to 7 months from the time you submit. It is a kind of gradual process. Your application will first go to peer review. A score will be given to you a few days after review on that application. And then several weeks later, you will get a summary statement, which contains the written comments of your reviewers. And if the application was discussed, about the top half of applications go forward to discussion, you'll get a summary of what that discussion was and what the score driving strengths and weaknesses were for the application. Several months after that, or a month or 2 after that, is typically when the NINDS council meeting happens, where our council or advisory board provides feedback on all the funding plans coming out of NINDS. And then the director of NINDS will approve those funding plans, and we will send out funding recommendations. Those recommendations are non-binding, does not guarantee funding, but it indicates that there's an intent to fund. And then the notice of award is typically awarded about one month after that, sometimes 2 months if there's delays in getting that award out. So that's the timeline that you're looking at and kind of how you'll get that feedback back from the NIH. And then finally, what advice do I give new applicants is if at first you don't succeed, try again. It can be discouraging to not get funded or to get a score that is close but not quite there to get funded. It is often the case that resubmissions improve with score because you're getting hopefully very constructive comments from your reviewers about how to improve your application, what kinds of things that they saw as weaknesses, which allow you to improve that, and try again in a resubmission. And often, not always, but often we see that those scores improve. And it can sometimes take several rounds to be funded. And I would advise incorporating that expectation into your company's fundraising timeline. And then finally, this is my contact information and Dr. Natalie Trzynski, who's a scientific project manager and program officer on our team. I encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions. I also highly encourage both signing up for the listservs at NINDS Division of Translational Research and the NIH SBIR and STTR listserv, as they are going to be sources for getting a lot of the updates on, announcements for webinars, programs, et cetera. And then both of those groups also have Twitter handles where they also do put out important news. And then the websites for both our small business, NINDS small business program, and the larger SBIR.nih.gov are also provided here, which are great sources of information. I'm happy to stop there and take any questions.
There we go. Emily, thank you very much indeed. That was terrific.
Sure.
and very helpful. So while folks are inserting their questions on Q&A, you had meant you would reference kind of odd looking numbers for phase 1 and phase 2. Does that account for cost of living? And then secondly, the ceiling, so the budget limits that you had mentioned, Emily, does that include indirect costs and profit as well?
Yes, so I'll answer the second one first. So the budget numbers that I listed are total cost. That includes indirects, that includes fee. That guidance is for total cost. And then the first one you said, I'm sorry, the numbers that you were referencing. Do you mind just helping me, Martin?
Oh yeah. Well, I forget what the numbers are, but it wasn't something like 256,000. It was 256,000 and something. So
yes. I think.
Yeah.
So that was set at the sort of congressional and small business administration level. And my understanding is it was like a % increase of a previous number. And so that's how that weird number got there. Yeah, that's not from the NIH, that's from the Small Business Administration, and applies to, that's the hard cap for all SBIR and STTR funding across all of the government institutes that provide that funding. What's unique to us is, what's unique to each institute at NIH is whether they have waivers that allow you to exceed those hard caps, and then how much what the guidance is for those budgets that would exceed the hard cap.
Got it. So that leads me right into the next question. I wanted to see if you could help us understand the waiver opportunity.
Sure.
Is there something on our end, Emily, that we need to do in order to determine, number one, whether our initiative would even qualify for waiver funding?
Yes, so this is another process that varies widely across institutes. So definitely important to know which institute you're applying to. At NINDS, you don't have to fill out anything to get approval for a waiver, and program staff actually won't confirm that you're eligible for a waiver because we have not seen the full application and we don't pre-review applications. So what you can do is send us your specific aims page and say, I think I'm going to be applying I think I fall into budget waiver X, and we can say, it looks like based on your specific aims page that would qualify. But really, you don't need that. You can just simply, if you think that your project fits into one of those waiver categories, you can go ahead and apply with a budget that falls into our guidance and it exceeds the hard cap. And you'll be verified. Either way, you're going to be verified after the time of application that indeed you fall into those waiver categories. You are welcome to put, not required, but you are welcome to put a line in your budget justification that says something to the effect of, per NINDS guidance, our project falls into waiver, category X on in vivo animal testing, and therefore we can request a budget up to, of Y. That's really just to inform reviewers that
Mhm.
there is a path to getting that funding that may exceed the hard cap that they may not be used to seeing, but it's not required, and there's no formal, waiver application you have to go through. There's no formal approval that you need. You're welcome to check with us just to make sure that it seems like you're in that waiver category, but you do not need official programmatic approval or an official waiver.
Got it. Okay. And for phase two, the number that you shared with us, the ceiling, and then the waiver, was that for phase two A only, or was that for both A and B?
Yeah, so phase 2 and 2B both have that guidance of up to 3 million. I think so. Our separate, so because we have separate funding opportunities for phase 2B
Yep.
and CRP, I think that guidance is actually, that budget guidance is clearer in those specific funding opportunities. But yeah, for your awareness, so you may go up to 3 million if you apply to those budget categories for phase 2 and 2B. And for the CRP program, you can actually go to 3.3 million, and that's clear in the funding opportunity announcement.
Got it. Nice. Interesting. Well, before I continue to hogging the airwaves here, we do have some questions for you. And the first one is anonymous. Welcome back, anonymous. What level of detail is needed, Emily, for a medical device application that has hardware and software components?
Yeah.
Do you have any examples or something that you might?
So there are sample applications on the website. I don't know offhand if they are specific to medical devices and software.
Uh,
And I think that's a very fair question, because it's almost always the case that reviewers might say something to the effect of, not enough detail, or I need it more detail.
right.
So I think trying to utilize some of the real estate of that research strategy to go into some of the details about specifically what has been done. If you're at a prototype stage, what exactly have you built, and what exactly more do you have to build in the software stage? Or a lot of times I'll see with applications proposing machine learning or software, there can be a lot of confusion or uncertainty about what exactly is it they're doing, what exactly is the data you're pulling in, what exactly are the features you're pulling out, what. So I think providing that depth is important, but ultimately it's hard to give a general answer, because it really depends on the reviewers and what kind of detail they want to see. But I would err on the side of more detail, because I think it's more common to see reviewers ask for additional detail than it is to have too much.
That's pretty much our philosophy. We hammer away at our clients, and we work with them to do a deep dive on study approach, research methodology, and so forth. But that brings up another question before we flip on to Hunan. And you had mentioned the specifics aims page.
Yeah.
And that's something that we set great store by here, but I'm not entirely certain if everybody who's with us today really knows a specific aims page.
Sure.
What it looks
Yeah.
like. Maybe if you could describe that just a bit.
I'm happy to. And again, that's somewhere where if you take a look at the sample applications available on the website, it's incredibly helpful to see those specific aims pages written out as examples. The reason this is utilized heavily is it really is the best kind of snapshot of what you are doing and why. So typically these specific aims page, the top half or so is letting us know in very, very succinct language what the problem is, how you're fixing it, what your approach is, why that approach is going to work, and then what exactly you're going to do in the project. The reason we utilize that instead of the abstract is, the abstract is something that's going to be public. Often it's very broad as far as the details. The specific aims page has all that very succinctly laid out, and that's what we rely heavily on the program side when we are taking a look at and giving feedback on, okay, what are you doing? What's the right institute? What's the right funding opportunity? And then in the application, I have less experience about the weight of that specific aims page to reviewers, but I do know that lots of reviewers tend to, that to be their go-to place to get a quick snapshot of what is going on and orient them to the application. You know, I can really only speak as to how program staff utilizes it, which is really in aiding and helping to find program staff, applicants, the right opportunities and the right program contacts, and give feedback on the sort of broad design of their study. I think it is in my sense, or what I can pick up, I think it's also very important to have that be very clear for the purposes of review.
Couldn't agree with you more. And again, this is something that we counsel here as well, to in lieu of or in addition to an LOI, letter of intent or inquiry, to send you that specific aims page. A
Yes,
great
yes,
way to start, if nothing else, the pollination process with all of you folks there, but also
absolutely. Yeah, and
get,
if you, oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry, Martin, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
that's okay. I was just simply, it's a good way for us to know whether or not we're going down the right path or not.
Exactly. So a good starting point for a project is hammering out that specific aims page to start with, because then you can go to programs, you can start getting the right direction as you're filling in the rest of that application. But if you can get a very clear specific aims page, you can, that's going to be basically the information that program officers are going to want to see to help guide you. So I think that's a very sensible starting point. Get that into shape and start interacting with NIH. Find out what institute you're going to, find out the funding opportunity, and then use that to tailor or flesh out the rest of your application.
Got it. Terrific. Thanks so much, Emily. And Hunan, welcome back. Dr. Liu, Emily has a question about the funding rates between SBIR and STTR. How do they differ? Are there distinguishing
I
characteristics?
believe they're about the same. I honestly would have to pull up the website to take a look. And that data is organized by SBIR, STTR, as well as broken down by mechanism. So you can see specific mechanisms, and it's given annually from, I think, 2008 to 2019. So it is really helpful. You can just download the spreadsheet. My recollection from when I looked at it is that they're very similar, but there is less data in the STTR because it's a smaller set aside. There's less applications that come in. So it might be more variable in the STTR case, but I think they roughly average about the same. But I'd pull up the data to take
Sure.
a look, and it's available on that link.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. And Ainun, welcome back as well. So Dr. Begum, Emily has a question with regard to, first of all, she said, great informative presentation. So ditto on that.
Great.
She mentions that sometimes she has found that NINDS and NIA topics may overlap. And she was interested in submitting an Alzheimer's early diagnostic biomarker initiative and wondered where it falls or best to submit. Would it be NINDS or NIA? Or
Yeah, that's a great question. And Alzheimer's is an area of overlap between NIA and NINDS. It's often the case. So if a project is specifically focused on Alzheimer's disease related dementia, that one's definitely going to come to NINDS. If it's more broadly on Alzheimer's disease, often we will point people to NIA to start with, because NIA has a significant portion of their budget and funding and priorities in Alzheimer's disease. And so they have some specific funding opportunities for Alzheimer's. So we often send them there first because there's just such a big focus on that it tends to be a great place for Alzheimer's to go. We often talk with them. We are often dual assigned, meaning that in an application, NIA might take the lead, but NINDS is a secondary institute, and that allows there to be, potential for one or the other institute funding the application in the end. But I think what tends to happen is if you're kind of in general Alzheimer's, NIA is a good starting point, and then there will be redirection to NINDS if it seems like we are the better fit from a mission standpoint. But yes, that is a shared area, and it can be, I recognize, confusing for applicants in the Alzheimer's space.
Thanks so much for sharing it. You actually answered my next question, so which was great in terms of the degree of collaboration between you and NIA. Carried further, and this is something that Dr. Begum and I have discussed anyway, even before you showed up, is that in addition to perhaps co-funding or maybe collaborative research with you and NIA, how about foundations? Do we
work with them?
Yeah, do you work with them, and to what extent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at NINDS, we do work with, or we stay in contact and have relationships with several of the foundations that are in our space. And there's quite a bit, because NINDS covers such a broad range of not only things like stroke and epilepsy, but dozens and dozens of neurogenetic disorders that have their own uh, advocacy and nonprofit foundations associated with each individual disease. So as a whole, NINDS and our program specifically have relationships with these groups. We do not currently have formal partnerships for co-funding the way that, say, NIA has a formal relationship with an Alzheimer's foundation to help provide gap funding between phase 1 and phase 2, which I think is a fantastic program. We've talked to them a lot about how we could possibly echo that over. We just have to figure out if we do something like that, how we do it across so many different areas, because we're looking outside of just Alzheimer's. But so we don't have anything like what that specific thing that NIA has with Alzheimer's disease, but we do work with foundations. We talk to them a lot about what they're seeing, what their priorities are, how they fund, what gaps are needed. So we work with them, but we don't have a formal relationship for or funding opportunities that are partnered with us at this time.
Terrific. Thanks. And Jayu had a question with regard to TAB. I was going to ask you a question likewise about
Sure.
that with regard to TAB assistance. Do you, as part of TAB assistance, do you help identify business support or services, for example, a CRO?
Mhm.
And secondly, Jayu's question is a CRO budget allowed in a grant? Can we budget for CRO support in our study approach?
Yeah, I'm happy to address both of those. They're great questions. So TABA support. So there's two ways to get support, your TABA support, which again can be allotted. It's sort of separate from your directs, indirects fee. It's an additional $6K for phase 1 and an additional $50K that can be outsourced. There's guidance around what kinds of activities that can be used for, but they are more broad than just R&D. They can be more commercial or business support. The way that you can access those funds is there's currently two ways. So the first is in your application, you can specify that in a budget light item that you're using TABA funds, and you can have a vendor and propose what they would be doing in the application. If you do not come in your application requesting those TABA funds for a specific purpose and with a specific vendor, what is there's been old ways to manage that at the NIH that have sunsetted, and what is being re-released to the community this later this fall, hopefully this month, is NIH basically providing contract support to get that TABA support to you. So for phase 1, this includes a needs assessment to figure out what exactly those funds could best be used for your company. And then in phase 2, this is providing those services through a contractor who can find the right vendor for you and get you that contract. More information, because this is still kind of it's getting there. More information and website with a lot more of the guidance there will be forthcoming this month. But it's meant to help more companies actually access their TABA, because we don't see that a lot of applications come in with that request. It requires a lot of knowledge about SBIR and STTR funding that not all companies have. The second question was about, can you request CROs in your budget? And yes, you can. The maybe concern about that may come from how much outsourcing is allowed in these work requirements associated with SBIR and STTR mechanisms. And every institute handles fee for service work maybe a little bit differently, or has different policies of what they qualify as fee for service work. So I'll speak specifically to NINDS. At NINDS, if the work is at a CRO or another vendor is clearly fee for service, it does not count against the company's portion of the work. So it's not going to take away from the 40% of the budget that would go to the company. It can be kind of under that company's umbrella, but it has to be very clear that it's fee for service. What we look for there is we want to see that there's no intellectual contribution from that vendor. We want to see that there is the expertise at the level of the company to oversee that work and interpret that work. And I think those are really the two big things. So it should be clear that your team can oversee the work that's being done at that vendor. You have the expertise, you have the ability to interpret that data and direct that research, and then the vendor's just executing. They're not a team member or someone who's directing the overall research effort. If that is clearly shown and justified, then that can often be a considered fee for service. It is typically, but not always, the case that academic partners are almost never fee for service. Those are really going to be sub awards.
Right.
Those are partners in the direction of the research. Those are COIs typically. And it's not always the case that CROs are fee for service. There are some times when you're working with a CRO and you're actually really leveraging the expertise of that CRO in directing the overall project. So it's not a clear fine line of CRO is fee for service. There kind of needs, at NINDS, we really look deeper than that into what's the contribution of the vendor or the partner, and what is the expertise on the team, and can we really justify that this is a fee for service and not really should be like a sub award or partner.
Got it. So I was reminded of another question that we've been asked quite often, and I think this occurs at many research universities across the country, and that is, can we include non-USA partners to perform research? And if so, are there any restraints, constraints, terms, conditions, anything like that?
Yeah, this is another great question. So generally speaking, SBIR and STTR funding cannot be used for foreign work. This includes a US-based company that has a site in Europe where you're going to be doing manufacturing. That would generally not be allowed. If you have a consultant who is foreign-based and will be doing their work in a foreign location, that is considered foreign work. So the ways that people can manage this. One, it is possible that you can use your fee because that's your profit, and that can be used however you want. So if it's consulting, for instance, where it's typically a small dollar sign, I do see companies that will utilize their fee to pay for consultants who are located in a foreign location. For bigger things where your fee isn't really enough to cover it, it's possible you may have to look for other types of funding. The second avenue is to see if a foreign waiver could be something that you could pursue. This is a waiver to allow foreign work for a project. These are not commonly granted. At a minimum, you need to show that the work you're doing, or the work that you're proposing to do on a foreign site is, one, essential to your project, two, that it could not be done in the US at any cost, and the third one, so that can be done at any cost, and it's essential to your project, and maybe that might be it. I'm forgetting. I think there's a third point I'll probably recall as I go through. But you could certainly reach out. That is a case where we would say talk to a program officer if you feel that you have an essential component that can only be done in a foreign area. It could not be done in the US at any cost, and we will talk to you about whether we encourage you to include that in your application, or whether we don't, whether we would encourage you to find another way to support that work.
Got it. That's terrific. Thanks. Very helpful. I wanted to go back on the TABA question, just one more question, and then we'll move on. First of all, we have several clients who took advantage of your AAP program and benefited very well. So kudos to that. But is TABA, now AAP, of course, TABA, that's post-award, post-phase one?
Yeah, so you can request TABA funding in
Yeah.
your application. So in a phase 1 application, for instance, you could put in your application a budget line item for TABA up to 6K that would be for some service. This could include things, I believe, like, I don't know, market report or IT support, or there's guidance on the SBIR NIH page of kind of what would fall into TABA. You can request it in your application. If you do not request it in your application, you cannot come back and ask for that money. And this is the problem. This is why the NIH has tried to figure out ways that we can get that TABA support to companies, recognizing that it takes a really advanced level of understanding of the small business legislature and congressional program to know what TABA is or how to get it. So what we're trying to do is create ways that a company can say, hey, I didn't ask for TABA, can I get support? Can I get TABA support as a phase 1 or phase 2 company? And the sort of more information of how you can do this if you are a phase 1 funded company or a phase 2 funded company and did not ask for TABA in your application and want to get that additional support. We should have more information that we're starting to unroll through, for instance, the listservs and the Twitter handles I mentioned. There should be announcements coming where there's more information on how to do that.
Great. So is this in lieu of or in concert with TNA, technology niche assessment through foresight, or support from law?
Yes. So the this is replacing some of the commercialization assistance
Right.
program, which was previously run as basically those TABA. That was kind of how a company that didn't have TABA support could get TABA support by being in this program. The reason it's sort of being exchanged is because that program was kind of a one size fits all. You went through this commercialization development program, and it was found that some companies really just need some very specific services. And so what we're kind of trying to do with what the NIH is trying to do with this new thing for TABA is really to help companies. Let's figure out exactly what you would best benefit from, 50K in services from, and get you those services instead of putting you through a sort of general commercialization development program.
So TABA replaces the foresight program?
So TAB has always been there. The CAP program was kind of how companies could utilize TABA funds in the past, and now it's going to be specific services for each company. A contract that can help connect a company to a vendor to provide the service that they most need. Does that make sense? I apologize if it's not super clear, because
okay.
we're still having all of our kind of communications laid out to kind of go over the program. So I'm giving you a little bit of a preview as to how that will work, and
that's
hopefully
terrific.
you can get
soon. So many of you are going through an evolutionary process right now, so I just want to make certain that I'm up to date, or we're up to date on all the news. So I wanted to flip back to another one, and I know we're getting toward the end of this thing, which is an indication of a great talk, but not to be confused with Star Wars, but C3I. What's the difference? You had mentioned, I think, focus on medical devices and
That's
so
right.
forth. And we are an I-Core site. Many of our teams have gone through NSF.
Great.
And I've been with 2 teams through NCI, NIH, I-Core as well. And a colleague and I also instruct I-Core here. But what is the difference between the two? And is it one or the other, or can we do both, or what's?
You can do both. They are very similar in sort of what you're doing. So it is a lot of, I think in C3I it's more generally business development, though there is still that customer discovery component to it. That's an I-Core. The reason C3I was created by NIBIB, which focuses on informatics and devices. And they found that in companies that were going through I-Core, that a lot of the I-Core program more generally was in a lot of companies going in for therapeutics or biologics or biomarkers, and there wasn't specialized expertise for devices. And so there was a feeling that, well, devices are they have their own things going on in the commercialization path. And so NIBIB set up this specific program for C3I. that is explicitly on medical devices. There are a few differences. As I said, it's a little bit more broadly focused on business development than just customer discovery. It also is open to, this is actually an important point potentially for this audience, it's open to both funded companies and NIH-funded investigators. So academic investigators working in the medical device space who are thinking about starting a company or thinking about commercializing or spinning off their technology can also participate in this program. It's not just funded companies. That program is held once a year. It begins in around the beginning of summer, end of spring, and goes through the summer. And then I think there's also a fall component to it. And I'm happy to send more information about C3I. Again, it's run through NIBIB, the same way that ICOR is run through NCI, but NINDS is a participant in both, meaning we will sponsor companies and fund them from NINDS companies or researchers in the case of C3I to go into this program.
Terrific, Emily. We are indeed interested in that. So yeah, we'll reach out to Emily and
yeah, happy to send you the website for them and the program contact to Lana Goldberg.
Great. And so Juana, welcome back. Good to see you again. Great talk here for Juana. Ditto again. She wanted to know, and this is an area that we set great store by here at UC Riverside as well, a concentration on women leaders and founding new innovations and so forth, and also paying close attention to communities that may not be getting as much attention as elsewhere. But Juana's question is with regard to, do you at NINDS, do you have a special track for women-owned companies, or are there special incentives for women or minorities by any chance?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that too. In our priority notice, which I linked to in a talk, and I know the slides will be available. You can also, under Google, if you put NINDS SBIR priority notice, it should lead you there. We actually specifically highlight that our program does prioritize diverse perspective companies and women. I think we say women-owned small businesses because that's what's captured by the SBA. So by stating that we have a priority and that is one component, so diversity in the company is one component that we look at in creating funding recommendations. So it's not that there's a specific track or a specific, different set of a different bucket, but that is a factor that we do look at when evaluating companies for funding. We also, I highly recommend, so one of the hard parts is tracking. If you qualify as a women-owned small business according to the SBA or a minority-owned small business according to the SBA, I highly recommend going through the process with the SBA of getting sort of the I don't know, the certification or the assignment of a women-owned small business or minority-owned small business, because that's really the only data that we have access to about the business to know whether it's women or minority-led. So that's very helpful, and that's a way for us to sort of be able to see that indeed it is a women-owned or minority-owned small business. And then as far as other areas of support, I mentioned the applicant assistance program. That is, we highly recommend diverse applicants. What we are looking for in that, and you'll see in the application if you go through that, we specifically ask for understanding various areas that might indicate that an applicant may not have the sort of traditional network, right? So we're looking at geographic diversity, we're looking at other underrepresented populations, and we're factoring that into choices for AAP. So diverse applicants are something that we highly encourage into AAP. And then the other thing to look at, if you are a company who is interested in bringing on diverse staff members, is the diversity supplement program, which we try to use to help encourage growth of a diverse workforce and then eventual leaders of companies. But that can be an incentive for companies to bring in diverse hires or underrepresented hires, because we will sort of provide supplements for that additional hire and R&D. So it's another thing to look at, maybe not from the company ownership standpoint of diversity, but from if you're someone who's interested in getting into a small business, this can be one mechanism to help make our workforce population more diverse in the biomedical and life sciences space. We are actively evaluating other ways that we can try to help make our portfolio more diverse, which is something that we recognize needs to happen not only in our portfolio, but across the NIH, across all funded companies in life sciences. I think it's recognized that diversity is an issue. And we hope we're trying to do more targeted outreach, and we're trying to do other things that we can to see a change in the portfolios. And so if you have ideas, I would love to hear them. We'd love to hear what could be helpful to applicants, or what they think are the barriers or the areas that can be supported by NINDS, because it's something that needs to be addressed, and we are actively trying to